Now there are thousands of jihadists sharpening their swords, making ready their guns, their bombs, and planning the next attack. Islam is never asleep to the possibility of terror. Yeah.
Tommy Robinson, the former leader of the English Defence League, addressing a rally in Dresden recently, hosted by Pegida, the anti-Islamist group routinely described as far-right and whose demonstrations attract tens of thousands of people in Germany. Now, with Robinson as their coordinator, Pegida are coming to the UK, starting with a march in my home city of Birmingham. My name's Adrian Goldberg, and I'm the son of a German Jewish refugee. My partner's heritage is Pakistani Muslim. So what does Pegida's arrival mean for me and my hometown? Well, much to my surprise, Tommy Robinson has agreed to meet me and come face to face with the Muslim critics who don't want him anywhere near Birmingham.
So we are at Birmingham International Airport train station, and this is the point that we'll be meeting to congregate for the start of our silent walk.
And this is the relaunch of Pegida in the UK, and you were the former leader of the English Defence League, a notorious organisation who brought fear and violence onto the streets. Why will Pegida be any different to the EDL?
Unfortunately, anyone who talks about Islam is regarded as far right, but where we are here, we can already see how this is going to be completely different to the English Defence League demonstrations. We're isolated, we're away from pubs, and we're taking the whole football culture that was embedded in the English Defence League out of it. We're trying to just create a safe environment that people can come when they feel what's happening in this country is not for the benefit of the people. They can come and have their say. They can oppose Islam through their democratic process. We're going to walk from here in silence, because we feel now we're trying to create a passive resistance to what's happening. The rules that are applied in Pegida in Germany, there's no shouting, there's no aggression. If there is, they have to leave the demonstration area. They're very disciplined and they're organised. They're German, aren't they?
Now, Tommy, as someone who comes from Birmingham, is very proud of its multicultural, cosmopolitan heritage. I hear Pegida and the EDL described as far-right, neo-Nazi. Can you understand why I'm concerned about the demonstration that you're bringing to the doorstep of this city?
Yeah, it's ridiculous, though. The whole neo-Nazi thing's ridiculous. I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm opposed to Islam as an ideology.
But people will hear that and think, well, given that Islam is integral to the life, the identity of Muslims, how can you say you're anti-Islam but not anti-Muslim? If you're anti-Islam, surely you must be anti-Muslim.
Muslims are people. Islam's an ideology. I pick fault with an ideology, not individual people. Some of the best people I met growing up in my life are Muslim kids, Muslim lads I've grown up with.
So we're driving now towards the Ladypool Road, Tommy. The Ladypool Road is the home of Birmingham's famous Balti Belt, probably from the 80s onwards. This is an area that I've known very well. It's an area internationally renowned for its food, for the great curries that are cooked here, and is an area with a defined and large Muslim population. Do you have a problem with that?
So when you say it's internationally known as for curries, it's also internationally known for terrorism. That's the problem. And there's areas like this across the UK.
I come down to the Ladypool Road, been down here on many occasions, never witnessed any problem as a white person. I don't feel unsafe.
Just 21 years old and you walk down here with four lads dressed in a working class way, they'd be at risk. You are confronted, and that's the truth of it. It's being able to talk about these issues without saying it's every Muslim. I know it's not, but this will never change. This is not going to change back. You're not going to get English families moving into this area because of the reasons that I talk about, and they're the reasons we need to tackle.
Could that not be because of the prejudice of English families?
Yes, it could.
A couple of ladies there shopping at the greengrocers wearing the face veil, wearing the niqab, and we're walking down now.
There's
three women, two of them showing only the slits of their eyes.
Well, France banned the burqa.
Does that trouble you?
It should trouble us all. If we want true integration and assimilation, that is not going to help or encourage it in any way. It's a security issue. We don't know who they are. We don't know who's under it.
The vast majority of people wearing a niqab, the face covering, or a burqa, the body covering,
represent no threat to anyone.
There's no integration or assimilation at all. Look, I don't want them to start drinking beer, eating pork. I'm not saying that.
Tommy draws a contrast between the Muslim population and his own experience with a Sikh friend at a Birmingham Gurdwara or temple.
My friend up in this area, when it was St George's Day, they sent pictures from their Gurdwara where all the kids were celebrating St George's Day. That's integration.
So you'd like to see local mosques celebrating St George's Day?
I think every mosque in this country should fly the flag of St George. I'd love to see it. Unfortunately, they won't. If you want Sharia, leave. Okay? When you come into this country, you accept this country for the democracy there is, for the liberal values it has, for freedom of speech.
Tommy talks about the Sharia, Islamic law, a lot. It's true that there are some Sharia councils operating in Britain. Tommy wants to see them closed down. But do Muslims here really want to live under an alternative legal system based on their faith? We stopped off at a restaurant in Sparkbrook to meet Jahan Mahmood, a Muslim and a former Home Office counter-terrorism advisor.
Under British law, whatever stands. And let me just make this very clear. As a British Muslim living in a country that is non-Muslim, by Sharia itself, I have to abide by the rules of the land that I live in. Otherwise, I don't have to be here. It's as simple as that.
But that's your view. Some people see this as a house of war.
But the second point is, under Sharia law, you cannot demand Sharia law in a non-Muslim country. It's illogical. You're going there for sanctuary in the first place, let's say, as a refugee, for instance, or even as an economic migrant.
What are your thoughts about Pegida coming to Birmingham and West Midlands?
Well, I mean, if I'm correct, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Pegida, the acronym, stands for Patriotic Europeans Against the Islamisation of the West or the Occident. Is that correct?
Better than I could have put it, yeah.
Okay. Right, so, I'm someone who's been working in Birmingham for a long time. I take security issues very seriously.
You say British Muslims are completely opposed to ISIS?
Yeah, I do. I think most are completely opposed to ISIS and their methods.
So when we're talking about completely opposed to ISIS, we have 2,000 British Muslims that have gone to fight for ISIS. Yeah, we have none that have gone to fight against ISIS.
Not true. There are Muslims who've gone out to join the Kurds to fight. So they have.
The precise number of British nationals fighting for ISIS is fiercely debated. Birmingham MP Khalid Mahmood, who is a Muslim, reckons, like Tommy, it's 2,000, but some academic estimates put the figure below 500. After leaving the restaurant, we bumped into former Guantanamo Bay detainee Moazzam Beg on Ladypool Road. He wouldn't allow us to record his meeting with Tommy Robinson, but posed for pictures which were swiftly shared online. Within minutes there were abusive posts aimed at Tommy, calling for people to get him out of Sparkbrook. He was scared and insisted we make a quick exit. Now you might think his fears exaggerated, until you realise that 6 Muslim men from Birmingham were jailed in 2013 for plotting to blow up an EDL rally which he was due to attend. Since founding the EDL in 2009, in protest at the disruption by Islamic extremists of a march for British troops in his hometown of Luton, he says he's been warned of 6 credible death threats against him. Do you think that your life is at risk?
I know, and I'll say it now, and I know when it happens, I will be killed by a Muslim. That's it. That's happening. I know that's happening already.
What makes you so certain?
History proves it. Anyone who said what I'm saying, anyone who's opposed Islam in the way I'm doing, in Europe, in the world, is murdered. That's it. There's a death sentence put up on them. When those 6 Muslims from this city decided to get IEDs, guns and bombs, yeah, they were ordered to do that. They didn't just do that. Off they went back.
Why are you here?
We're here because Birmingham is a hotspot, and we all know that. We're not promoting any violence either. We're just coming in as a peaceful resistance to what's happening.
Peaceful resistance to what, specifically?
Currently, we have the refugee crisis, which is not a refugee crisis. It's a migrant invasion. We can't sustain it. We already have enough problems in the UK. We have enough problems in this city. We have isolated and ghettoised communities who are Muslim. We have terrorists. We have big problems with sexual exploitation from Muslim gangs. So someone has to, at some point, stand up and say, enough is enough. We have to take drastic measures. We have to stand up for our culture, our identity, and we have to oppose what's happening currently.
What would those drastic measures be?
Me personally, I would stop the building mosques, stop Muslim immigration from Muslim countries. I would limit benefits to 2 children, Until Islam finds itself in the same situation that Sikhism, Hinduism, Judaism, all the other cultures and minorities that have come to this country, until they integrate in a similar way, we need to get to grip with the problem.
You say you're not an extremist, but to many people, the idea that you would, for example, ban the building of mosques, ban the building of places of worship, would seem to many people to be an extreme view.
It's not an extreme view at all. I'm not saying that I want Muslims to leave the UK. I'm not saying I want to abolish the mosques that are already here. People wish to be a religious Muslim inside their home, then fine. We have to ban aspects of Sharia. That's what we have to do. We have to do that.
So I've brought Tommy now into the centre of Birmingham to meet Salma Yaqub. Salma is the former leader of the Respect Party, leading member of the Muslim community in Birmingham. And on previous occasions when Tommy has come here with the English Defence League, Salma has been an outspoken critic. Well, now Tommy's coming here with the relaunched Pegida. What do you make of that, Salma?
Very much an advocate of free speech, but I do think that what Tommy is doing, it's in the name, Pegida is anti-Islamisation. I do think it's opportunistic. It's kind of fear-mongering. Tommy has on occasion said he's not against Muslims, but it seems that every time you look at what Tommy's up to, it's about something against Islam and Muslims. So I can't help but be a bit sceptical as to what the motivation is.
You say it's opportunistic. I left the English Defence League over 2 years ago. In the 2 years since leaving the English Defence League, we've seen the Charlie Hebdo massacre. We've seen terrorist atrocity after terrorist atrocity after terrorist atrocity. We've seen planned terrorist attacks. We've seen people leaving this city to go and fight for ISIS. We've seen all these things. So when you say it's opportunistic, there's never a right moment for this because the problem is so bad.
As well as causing what you regard as fear and division, does the presence of the EDL and now Pegida cause any discussion within the Muslim community about the issues being raised, about the threat, as Tommy would portray it, of Islamisation?
Of course not, because the priority then becomes safety, because people are attacked. If you want to increase the appeal of the likes of the ISIS recruiters, this is what you do. You promote a them and us narrative. You get on the streets, you look threatening, and you say to people, these people don't belong here. That you are an ISIS recruiter.
Okay. We're completely peaceful and we have an organised demonstration. The same way that Muslims are allowed to demonstrate whenever they want, just let us demonstrate. The majority of people in this country are concerned with the spread of Islam. The majority. Those people don't feel like they have a political voice because people like yourself scream racist, bigot or extremist, or you say everything you're saying now.
You know, the danger of what you're saying is that Islamic State, Boko Haram, other groups of what might be termed Islamic radicals, you're taking them to stand for all Muslims.
No, I'm not. No.
Many Muslims in the UK vehemently oppose Boko Haram and so-called Islamic State.
I'm not saying it's all Muslims, but I'm not going to shy away from the fact that it's inspired by Islam. And I don't think Muslims should either.
Why should a Muslim listen to a former football hooligan with a string of convictions?
I'm just being honest. That's it. I'm just being honest. A lot of the time, being honest gets me in a lot of trouble.
Tommy seems to believe that true Islam justifies support for ISIS, but there isn't just one version of what the faith means. Walk around Birmingham and you'll see mosques and madrasas representing many different strains of Islam. And as far as I know, none of them, not even the ones happy to call themselves fundamentalists, support ISIS. Some of them, like the Shia mosques, would be targets for IS in Iraq and Syria. Given Tommy's outspoken views on Islam, it was something of a jaw-dropping moment when, in October 2013, it was announced that he had quit the EDL and was starting to work with Quilliam, a Muslim-led think tank, albeit one with a moderate voice. His traditional supporters were dismayed.
People call me a traitor. I sit with Muslims all the time. Anyone who knows me in Luton knows that. So it was nothing new to sit with Muslims who are denouncing this extremism, and I thought, if there's an answer here, let's look for it. Unfortunately, there wasn't. And I don't think we can rely on groups like William to solve our problems. In fact, what I found was, unfortunately, they're more hated than me. That's the reality.
Tommy's flirtation with Quilliam came in 2013, at a troubled time in his personal life. He'd recently been released from jail for using someone else's passport and was facing another prison sentence for a fraudulent mortgage application. Although in both cases he pleaded guilty, he feels he was being persecuted
as part of an establishment plot to silence him.
They'd broke me financially at the time. They'd closed my businesses. They'd closed everything. I had the prospect that my family were going to be made homeless when I was in custody. The problem is I'd moved house with my children 5 times in 4 years. Where we were at now, we're in a secure location. No one knows where we're at. My children are settled in school. Yeah, they're happy. So for the first time, I put my children's security and stability and my wife's before the interests of the cause. And I had to do that because I knew that the English Defence League were not going to support my family. I knew that. So I've done what I had to do for my family.
But you've now renounced Quilliam.
I don't renounce Quilliam. The reality is that Quilliam are not bringing Muslims around to their way of thinking. That doesn't mean I'm renouncing them.
It strikes me that perhaps you were on the verge of some kind of a breakdown, and that the various pressures that you were facing pushed you to the very, very brink. Would that be fair?
Yeah, it would be fair, yeah. I'm a father of 3 now. My mum was, what we thought at the time, was terminally ill. I thought I dealt with the fact, then the reality that I'm walking with a death sentence, yeah? Going to prison saved my life. And I didn't have a chance to look at myself until I spent 22 weeks in solitary confinement, which I still protest was wrong, but at the same time it gave me time to really evaluate where I was. And I was a bad dad, I was a bad husband, I was a horrible person at that time. I think if you take any 25-year-old lad off a building site, you stick them on the world stage, you make them the leader of the biggest street protest movement, you give them warnings to kill them, all the personal pressures of the police and the state coming down on them, I'd think anyone would struggle to deal with it. Well, yeah, I'll struggle to deal with it. I'm not going to die. Now I've had time out, I want to see my children grow up. I want to be there.
Before I met Tommy, I read his autobiography, Enemy of the State. The title reflects what I'd assumed was paranoia on his part. He feels that the authorities regard him as dangerous and are monitoring him. But when we met him in a hotel lobby, there did seem to be at least one individual paying unusually close attention to us.
Yeah, that was the geezer. I watched him.
Now, as we were talking there, Tommy, we've seen a man walk into the lobby, and as anyone who's read your autobiography, Enemy of the State, will know, you've served time in prison, and you also believe that you've been tapped up by a secretive organisation called the Metropolitan Intelligence Bureau. You believe may also be linked to MI5. So, as we're speaking today, you believe that you're being followed by...
I know I'm being followed. I've sat and had a breakfast for 45 minutes and I've watched him loiter outside the pub. I've watched 2 other people walk past him have conversations with him without realising I'm looking at him. I had a breakfast all the way a mile down the road. Now we're here, he's walked in here, he's booked into this hotel. What we have to understand in this country is that there are dark powers at play who don't want peace either. Yeah?
Do you believe that you are an enemy of the state?
I am.
We want a Europe free from fear, free from terrorists who shout Allah Akbar, free from roaming Muslim rape gangs who target our young girls and women, free from the dark shadows and the visual scars of minarets, free from the sounds of the call to prayer.
Tommy Robinson at that Pegida rally in Dresden. When this programme reported on Pegida in Germany last year, we found it attracted a very different crowd to the beer-swilling football lads familiar to anyone who's witnessed an English Defence League rally. I've ducked bottles and bricks before now as EDL supporters clashed with opponents in Birmingham. A typical Pegida demonstrator, on the other hand, might wield nothing more offensive than a briefcase after a hard day at the office. It's an altogether more respectable, middle-class audience. What would you say is the key difference, if any, between Pegida and the EDL?
The difference is completely the way we're going about things. I stood in Germany and, to be honest, I felt ashamed really of the way we conducted ourselves as English men.
As the EDL?
As the EDL, yeah. I stood there in Dresden, I spoke to 40,000 people. There was no aggression. The discipline they had. And they're all in it together, complete unity. But the difference in that and the English Defence League, what we did was we mixed a social day out, which was partly my fault because I come from a football background or a football culture, where we followed that into demonstrations, yeah? That shouldn't have been done, and it doesn't work.
Come on, then.
Your dog's jumping all over me here.
We watched loads of sports.
Are you going to be going to the Pegida demonstration?
I may be, yeah.
We've come now to the home of a local EDL supporter who wants to be known as Jane. She was first drawn to the organisation by their opposition to plans for a new mosque in nearby Dudley.
They've got 8 or 9 mosques already in Dudley, and I just don't think they needed another one, especially that size. There's just too many mosques. There really is.
Are there too many Muslims?
I really think there is. They've just took over the high streets with takeaway shops, and you get them congregating outside on a night. You get them shouting at you. Whitehall, White Slag.
On this estate where we are there any Muslims?
Yeah,
Are they friends of yours?
no.
Have you tried to make friends? Have they tried to make friends with you?
Yeah, we used to have Christmas cards off the ones on the corner, but don't get them anymore. They won't even acknowledge, they won't even say hello, and I don't know why.
Are you afraid of Muslims?
I am a little, yeah. Especially like if I'm walking with my 2 girls, you see like gangs of them, I tend to like cross over. My 2 girls went on the pedal bikes just round the corner, and a car pulled up with 2 Muslim men in it and tried to grab my girls and put them in the car. So I won't even let them play out.
How do you know they were Muslim men?
My 2 girls know the difference between a Muslim and a white.
But why does it matter that they were Muslim men as opposed to 2 dangerous men of whatever description?
It's just the fact there's a lot of Muslim grooming and a lot of young girls being taken by Muslim men to hotels.
Did you report that?
Yeah, I did.
And what response did you get?
None. No registration of the car. Police can't do anything.
Jane's experience echoes that of many people I've spoken to around the West Midlands, and it's one I've witnessed myself. A growing sense, in some communities anyway, of separation, with Muslims seen to be living apart from their neighbours. What's causing it is a moot point, but it seems to be a division based more on religion and culture, not skin colour. The issue of grooming that Jane raised has encouraged Tommy Robinson to make common cause with the Sikh Awareness Society, who, even if they don't support Pegida, share his concern about Muslim grooming gangs.
Now, Tommy, here we are at this Sikh temple in Handsworth in Birmingham. You've respectfully taken your shoes off, and we're now down here chatting with Mohan Singh.
How many victims have you worked with? Do you know, Mohan?
We worked with hundreds of victims. I mean, 98% of the time we get phone calls and there's a mother crying on the other side. There's a 14-year-old girl dating a 22-year-old guy and happens to be a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi or an Afghani now. 14-year-old, 13-year-old is a child and 22 is an adult. So it's not right. And when you sort of dig deep into that problem, you know that it's not just a dating game. There's something more far sinister behind it.
But you're suggesting that this grooming issue is specifically linked to Muslims and to Islam?
Purely speaking from our experience here, is that it is a problem which we thought might have been Pakistani problem, but we are getting cases from the Afghan community, from the Bangladeshi community, and they do belong to a religion, and it's a common thread there.
Tommy believes there is a fundamental problem with Islam and its teachings in relation to women. As a Sikh, do you think that is the case?
Studying the subject, it is a cultural problem. If you believe that you can marry a 13, 12, then if it's acceptable in their own countries and their culture, it should be acceptable outside in the rest of the world. Even more than that, I think it's a cultural problem where men dominate the female gender, and the female should be available at their beck and call, and it doesn't really matter about the age. So if we have to re-educate a community, then so be it.
But while for Mohan Singh sexual grooming is a question of culture, for Tommy it's all about religion.
The reason why Muslims believe it's okay to have sex with a child who started puberty is because Muhammad did. It's got nothing to do with culture. It's because the Prophet did. And that's why the legal age for sex under Sharia, as soon as the girl starts her puberty.
Yet even if we acknowledge that there have been grooming gangs made up of predominantly Muslim men, the role their religion plays in that is hotly disputed. If it was such an integral part of Islam, wouldn't every devout follower in Britain be willing to break the law and flout the age of consent? Yet clearly the vast majority don't. I took Tommy to meet Wasim Zafar, a Birmingham councillor in inner city Lozells. As a Muslim, he has a very different take on the issue of child sexual exploitation and Islam.
The reference to the teachings of the Quran are totally disingenuous, they're totally wrong, and it's just not true. It's completely ridiculous. There's been some high-profile cases which involve people from an Asian, Muslim or Pakistani background, but if you look across the country, there's been other high-profile, there's been issues with Jimmy Savile and others, right? He wasn't a Muslim or a Pakistani or an Asian for that matter. I don't accept that there is an issue specifically within the Pakistani or Muslim community.
Wasim, you talked about the fear that was in your community here in Lozells when the EDL came to Birmingham previously, and you say that the rhetoric of Tommy Robinson causes division.
I'm going to be honest with you, Tommy, your rhetoric and some of the stuff that you say threatens communities such as ours from being divided, and we've had issues here. We had riots in 81, 85, 2005, more recently in 2011 where we didn't have issues in Lozells, but in Aston and Newtown and surrounding neighbourhoods we did. But it's some of the rhetoric and the divisive stuff that you talk about that really threatens communities and the harmony of communities such as Lozells. By criticising Islam and pointing the finger at Islam with the distorted view that you've got, which is not the factual view, you are inciting racial hatred towards a particular section of society.
If that was the case, I'd be prosecuted by the police under inciting racial hatred laws. It's my God-given right to criticise Islam in this country. I should be free to do so. Unfortunately, I'm not. What I'm saying is, do you recognise a non-Muslim's right to criticise your religion?
I've got absolute no qualms whatsoever of sitting down with you and talking through what the real Islam is, right? Not your distorted view of Islam, but spreading hate and fear and marching up and down our streets, coming into places like Birmingham City Centre or the airport or wherever else you're going. The aggressive nature of doing that does not help society. It causes division, can cause all sorts of serious problems.
Should Pegida be allowed to march in Birmingham?
Well, I'm surprised they've been allowed to march anyway.
So should they be allowed to?
I don't think they should be.
Well, that's unfortunate, because I actually think that Muslims should be allowed to march, and I think that everyone should be allowed freedom of speech and freedom of assembly.
It remains to be seen, though, how many others will want to exercise that freedom in the name of Pegida UK, especially if Tommy remains the movement's mouthpiece. As the poster boy of the anti-Islamic movement, he may well attract supporters from the EDL, but that fan base, not to mention his checkered past, runs counter to Pegida's aspiration to attract a more respectable middle-class audience to their cause. Ostensibly their greatest asset, Tommy Robinson could yet turn out to be their greatest liability.